offer to show them my bank accounts, but it wouldn't make any difference. But I also don't like to be intimidated, and I don't like to think of myself as a coward who is afraid to face up to a controversy. So when I was invited to give a speech at the Oxford Farming Conference earlier this year, I decided to put all of my cards on the table and speak from the heart. The other reason I decided to speak out was because I've begun to realize just how much damage the anti-GM movement that I helped to bring into existence has now done in the world, both to the environment and to food security. Look at India, for example, where Bt cotton has been introduced very successfully. The latest comprehensive social science research shows that farmers have increased their yields by 1/4, thanks to being better able to control insect pests, and have increased their profits by 50%. The response by activists has been to spread pernicious myths about farmers committing suicide. They never tell you that the suicide rate is actually higher in cities, and that agricultural suicides have been on a downward trend, and that the problem of farmer suicides long pre-exists GM crops being introduced. So in India, when a collaboration of scientists, including those at international universities, tried to introduce a Bt brinjal or eggplant, they were stopped by activists dressing up as eggplants who managed to gain the ear of the environment minister, who then imposed a moratorium. This GM crop would have benefited public health because currently insecticides are used to an enormous extent, sometimes 40 times per crop in brinjal, and often applied by young children who face poisoning as a result. The activists never mentioned that Bt brinjal would help save children from pesticide poisoning, nor did they tell you that some of the opposition to GM came from chemical companies who were worried about losing their markets to more environmentally friendly GM crops. Overall, Bt crops worldwide have reduced pesticide use by 500 million kilograms over the last decade, something else the activists will never tell you. So many of the next generation of GM crops will be aimed at also reducing chemical use, that it's potentially a major benefit to the environment and to biodiversity. You can also look at how activists in Western countries have mobilized opposition to golden rice, which is aimed at tackling vitamin A deficiency, which takes the lives of some 6,000 people per day, mainly children. Today, golden rice has still not been able to be released commercially in any countries, and the death toll continues to mount up. In my own country, in the UK, there's a major problem with potato blight. To control it, farmers spray their crop as much as 15 times a season with fungicides. Organic potatoes just die when the blight comes, and I know because it happened to my own crop last year, which I grew organically. A GM potato which is fully blight resistant has been developed by public sector research institutes in several European countries working together collaboratively. And yet in Belgium, the activists destroyed the crop in the field. They even had a pitched battle with some young scientists who were trying to protect their work and protect their research. In Ireland, the Green Party tried to stop the blight-resistant potato with a court case. Today, public opinion in the UK is beginning to move away from supporting the activists and towards supporting science. The media coverage is much more positive on GM than many years ago, and last month, even a key government minister spoke out in very strong terms indeed. If I may quote this as well, this is what Owen Paterson, who's the UK Environment Minister, said on the 19th of June this year. Quote, "Used properly, the advanced plant breeding technique of GM promises effective ways to protect or increase crop yields. It has the potential to reduce fertilizer and chemical use, improve the efficiency of agricultural production, and reduce post-harvest losses. At the moment, Europe is missing out. Less than 0.1% of global GM cultivation occurred in the EU. While the rest of the world is ploughing ahead and reaping the benefits of new technologies, Europe risks being left behind. We cannot afford to let that happen." End of quote. So as the UK minister said, policymakers in Europe are increasingly concerned about the whole continent being left behind by agricultural improvements elsewhere in the world. Already it's been estimated that farmers in Europe are missing out on €1 billion worth of benefits that they could get if they were permitted to grow GM crops, already being grown on millions of hectares in other countries around the globe. European policy is in fact completely hypocritical. We're not an anti-GM continent in reality because we import millions of tons of GM maize and soya from the US, from Canada and from Brazil each year, mostly used for animal feeds. So it gives a competitive advantage to the rest of the world by letting them produce cheaper foods with better seeds, while denying this benefit to European farmers at home. It's important, therefore, to be clear that Europe is not a successful model to follow. European policy on biotechnology is in fact in a state of near collapse. Nothing has moved for the last 10 years, and now major companies are beginning to pull out altogether. This is why the UK is threatening to go its own way, so that its own capacity to innovate and develop new crop varieties is not vetoed by the superstitions of other countries like Italy and France, which are in deadlock with the European Commission and maintain domestic GMO bans in flagrant disregard of their own scientific advice. So my warning to Kenyan policymakers would be not to get left even further behind a continent that is itself already in danger of being left behind. If we look to the future, the world will have to feed another 1 billion people in the next 12 years, and a total population of 9.5 billion or more by 2050. Where are the largest numbers of these new consumers going to be born and live? In sub-Saharan Africa, with 20 million new people here in Kenya alone. It is unfortunately true that Africa is long overdue its own green revolution. Yields per hectare here for the main staple crops like maize are stagnant and are still many times lower than farming systems in the US, Europe, China and elsewhere. This revolution could be a newer model than the first one, which does not lead to such a dependency on agrochemicals and other inputs, and protects the biodiversity of Africa by improving productivity and thereby sparing valuable land for wildlife and natural ecosystems. I know the leaders of this country want Kenya to have the status of a newly industrializing nation by 2030, so that's in just a decade and a half from now. This is clearly an opportunity for leadership, both regionally and globally. But you do not develop an economy by squeezing out innovation and the deployment of new technologies. You do not encourage growth by sending out a signal that you're not open to investment in new sectors. You do not create jobs by sending whole industries overseas to locations where policy is not so restrictive. I'm not talking about Kenya here, by the way, I'm talking about Europe. If Kenya falls into the same trap, however, it will be a sad day indeed for a rising country which carries on its shoulders the hopes and future prospects of tens of millions of people. And some of the recent signs have not been good. Kenya has some very important agricultural research going on right now, which can promote food security by promoting the productivity of the lowest income smallholder farmers. There's insect-resistant maize, pest-resistant sweet potato under development here, for example. There's drought-resistant maize, which can yield a better harvest even in dry years. There's biofortified sorghum, which has vitamin A, iron, zinc, and better protein. There's virus-resistant cassava, which can help tackle brown streak disease and mosaic virus. And there's BT cotton awaiting commercial introduction, which has already been grown very successfully in Burkina Faso in West Africa. And yet recently, on the basis of the Seralini study, which was so flawed that it was seen as a bad joke in the rest of the world and was seriously criticized as flawed by every major scientific agency, on the basis of this single piece of pseudoscience, Kenyan policy appeared to change instantly with no further consideration. I worry that the fact that Kenya was fooled by Seralini undermined the stature of this country abroad and the prestige and the perception of its science. Indeed, it seems strange to me that so many Kenyans worry about the non-existent dangers of GM foods at a time when the biggest food health concern here is still that so many people do not get enough of it. Malnourished people do not gain anything from misguided scares about food safety. So I hope this Seralini affair is only a temporary setback and that good science can prevail over this kind of propaganda. For despite all of the challenges, the conflicts and the contradictions of being a growing, developing country, not to mention the traffic here in Nairobi, I can smell hope in the air today. So my final plea to you is, do not tie the hands of farmers behind their backs when they want to put food in the mouths of hungry children. Do not deny some of the most needy farmers in the entire world the right to choose what seeds they plant and what crops they grow to feed their own families. And most of all, do not curtail your own ambitions to develop world-leading innovations that could change the 21st century for the better. You may have heard of Norman Borlaug. He was an American agricultural researcher who won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1970 for his role in sparking the Green Revolution. And he's estimated to have saved 1 billion lives through increasing the productivity of staple food crops in developing countries. And he did this not just through fertilizers and irrigation, but through genetics, having high-yielding varieties of wheat and rice and other crops. Maybe this next Norman Borlaug may be Kenyan. Maybe she is even in this room. But if she's to change the world as he did, then her intellect, her creativity, her imagination must be set free from the entrenched opposition to GMOs which threatens to strangle this new technology at birth. I acknowledged at the beginning of this lecture my own role in promoting this scaremongering a decade and a half ago. So today, having said all of this, I feel I have at last begun to discharge my own responsibility to put right or wrong I myself committed in the past. And so with that, I hand over the torch to you. Thank you very much.